Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join today's Majlis for the Issale Sawab of my father, Ghulam Sajan. Many of you are joining from places where the time difference is much later than here in Toronto, so thank you very much for accommodating the time difference. I would like to begin today's program with a recitation of the Holy Quran by my brother-in-law, Shafiq Walji, joining us from Ukraine. So Shafiq, if you can please unmute yourself.
Okay, is that fine?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm going to recite a few verses from Surah Hujurat. It's the 49th chapter, and it contains etiquettes and norms to be observed in the Muslim community, and I believe in all of humanity as well. It targets the proper conduct towards the Prophet, an injunction against acting on news without verification, a call for peace and reconciliation, as well as injunctions against defamation, suspicion, and backbiting. It also declares a universal brotherhood among Muslims. The 13th verse, which is one of the most famous in the whole of the Quran, is understood by Muslim scholars to establish equality with regards to race and origin. Only God can determine one's nobility based on his or her piety. So I'll start off with a few verses from this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر أو أنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. I'll just translate the last ayat, which is the ayat number 13 that I talked about earlier, which says, O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know one another. Verily, the most honorable of you with Allah is that believer who has taqwa, one of the muttaqeen, and verily Allah is the all-knowing, all-aware. Fatima, I hand it over to you to continue the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for that beautiful recitation. It's hard to believe that 6 years have gone by since my father left this world and met with his creator. While this separation has been a difficult one, we are most grateful for having wonderful friends and community who have been very supportive throughout these years. We're also very grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have known Ghulam Sajan, to learn from his life lessons, his leadership, and his hopes for all of us individually, as well as an ummah. And for that, we are very grateful. Please join me in a Surah Al-Fatiha for all the marhumin, the loved ones of everyone who is on the call today. Al-Fatiha. The flow for today's program will be as follows. We will hear from two of my father's friends who will share a few words about him. This will be followed by an update on the situation of the Uyghur community in China. We will then have presentations by esteemed scholars, Shaykh Arif Abdul Hussain and Dr. Liyakat Takim. Following that, we will have a question and answer period where you will have the opportunity to engage with our esteemed panel. I will now ask Uncle Ali Raza Rajani from Toronto to share a few words. Ali Uncle, if you can please unmute yourself. Okay, thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Fatima, before I proceed, let me tell you one thing. Your father is very much alive. And his legacy is continuing by the fact that he has so many friends and people who love him dearly, who have been very close to him while he was alive, and they also fondly remember him all the time. And the fact that you, his daughter, is taking a lot of work that he was doing, you have a lot of qualities you have inherited from your dad. So please, we can just tell you, keep it up. Don't be deterred. Be perseverant like your father, and keep up the good work. And we are here to support you and to help you, and any help you need, all of us will be available. In the name of Ghulam, in the name of the cause that was Ghulam. My brothers and sisters, we have gathered here to remember a dear friend, Ghulam Sajan. I have had good fortune to have been associated with a lot of very prominent members of the community and members of other communities because of my work as president of Dar es Salaam Jamaat, president of Toronto Jamaat, and a lot of activities in the governments of Tanzania and Canada and social service associations. And I met a lot of prominent people. When we say prominent people, people who have contributed greatly to the Ummah. And amongst those people, I would keep Ghulam Sajan amongst the top 5 people that I've come across. I met literally hundreds of people, including I was lucky to have met Mother Teresa. But I can tell you, I would keep Ghulam amongst the first 5 top people that I have met. And why? Was it because he was my friend? No, not because of my friend. He was kind. He was compassionate. He was helpful to the forlorn and the poor. He was helpful to the communities that were serving, that were doing social services. Be it Ishnashri community, Ismaili, Hindu. You go to Vancouver, you go anywhere, you tell him, I'm coming from Jaffrey Community Center. They will tell you, is that Ghulam Sajan Center? Ghulam Sajan was like a person who was shining out. He was giving good image of the community. Now, why do I say I put him at the top? Ghulam had a lot of qualities, a lot of good qualities. But amongst the things that I liked the best was his impeccable integrity. Integrity not in the matter, not only in the matter of finance and other things, but even in what he spoke. He would only speak what was in his heart, whether you like it or you don't like it, because if he believed in something, he would bring it up and he would say it persistently. He would not be scared of anybody. He was not scared of the biggest of the most powerful people. If he felt there was something wrong, he would speak out. He was speaking with integrity. This was the quality that made Ghulam as Ghulam. This was the quality on which he lived his life. Ghulam, I met him the last time before he died, 2 days before he died. Zanin Bhai, I called her, I told her that how is Ghulam, and said, Ghulam would love to see you if you can make time. I said, okay, I'll come. So shortly I went to see him. And he told me, he was very weak and frail at that time, but he told me, Ali, je mane kaam karanu to badu kari lido chu. I have already written my last email, and now I put my pen down. And I'm waiting for the time that I will go to my Lord. He was waiting 2 days before. You say, I'm waiting, I'm prepared myself to meet my Lord. But Ali, I've closed my computer now, and I've told my children to open this computer. The moment I die, they should open the computer. I've drafted a letter, and I have written some email addresses, and this email should be sent to those people. So on the day he died, the children opened his computer as per his instruction. They found a letter drafted, and he sent it out to his friends or whoever he wanted to be sent out. And that letter started like this: by the time you received my letter, I will have gone to my Lord. And pray for me that I would be under in the presence of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. A man who is died, he's speaking from his grave. He said, I've gone, but I'm sending you a message. I'm still alive. That was Ghulam. And he sent this message, okay, by the time you receive this, you will have. And he added, and I was very happy to have acquainted with you in my life. Please call Jamaat office on this number to get details about my funeral. He could have said this 1 day before. He said while he was gone. So he was still speaking to us. And for those people who attend his funeral, he presented his own obituary. And one thing I forgot, when I went to see him, as he was talking like that, I started crying. He said, Ali, why do you cry? And I've told my children, I'm telling my friends, don't mourn my death. Go celebrate my life. For Ghulam lived a meaningful, fulfilling, and full of life. He said, go celebrate my life. Don't mourn my death. That was Ghulam. This statement has a strong message for us. Okay, if you live a fulfilling and meaningful life, your life never ends. And Ghulam is still alive. With all the cherished memories. We have cherished memories for a lot of people, for our parents, for our friends, anything. But Ghulam's memories are unique. Like I said, he spoke what was in his heart. With impeccable integrity. He would speak what he felt. He would tell me, Ali, you're wrong here. You're wrong. I would feel offended. And then I realized, oh, he's telling the truth. Or he may not be telling the truth, but this is what he believes. And he was very like that. So my brothers and sisters, as we gather here to remember our dear friend, and during the funeral, when he gave his obituary, his son-in-law, he was reading the obituary. And Ghulam said that I was, and this made me laugh also. He said, I was a stubborn person, so I will have my last word. And when people become somber, he said, my friends, I don't want to leave you in a sad mood, so I'll tell you a joke. And he even mentioned a joke in that obituary. This was Ghulam. Fatima, Ghulam is alive in our heart. His message, his whatever, the good he did, still is having its effect. And please continue to do this thing. And last, I would like to request everybody to recite Surah Fatiha for our dear, dear, dear brother, Ghulam. Al-Fatiha.
Thank you so much, Ali Uncle, for your very heartfelt words. Really appreciate it. I will now ask Uncle Bashir Versi, who is also from Toronto, to share a few words. Uncle Bashir.
Okay, I was waiting for you to unmute me. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Shaykh Arif, Professor Takim, members of the Ghulam Sajan family, brothers and sisters in faith, Assalamu alaikum. Ghulam was a dear friend of mine. I would like to thank the Sajan family for giving me the opportunity to say a few words on this occasion. 6 years have so swiftly swept by since the passing of my dear friend, and I believe it is appropriate that we hold this Issale Sawab Majlis to savor the fond memories of our friend, Zarinbai's loving husband, and Sabrine, Shaheen, and Fatima's devoted dad. Ghulam, in my estimation, was a great man, and I will soon tell you why. But first, let me refer to the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who penned a very inspirational poem called A Psalm of Life, or A Song of Life, wherein he glorifies life and its possibilities. When speaking of great men, Longfellow had this to say: lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. So, what footprints Ghulam's life has left behind for us? Ghulam was steeped in the sense of justice and fair play and a deep concern for the less fortunate amongst us. Way back when he was a young man in Kampala, he fought for the junior volunteers of Hussaini Volunteer Corps, who were denied khaki uniforms, which were given only to the senior volunteers. This did not sit well with Ghulam, as in his view, every volunteer had to be treated equally. He organized a blood donor clinic in Kampala and initiated a project with the object of ensuring that no member of the Kampala community lived in rented premises. And after the expulsion of his family from Uganda, when he stayed for a brief period in Karachi, he became part of a volunteer group which started a blood donor clinic there. While in Toronto, Ghulam undertook many commitments, held hundreds of volunteer positions in numerous not-for-profit and charitable organizations, and received many awards during the course of his extensive career. Listing them all would take an eon, and I've been given very limited time for my presentation. So I will limit myself to reciting excerpts from 2 letters of recommendation for Ghulam to receive the Order of Ontario. The first letter was written to the selection committee by the retired Chief of York Region Police, Mr. Armand P. Labarge, and the second by Dr. Sajjad Ibrahim, president of his investment firm, Lark Investment, and of Sajjadia Trust, a registered Canadian charity. Retired Chief Labarge said, among other things, that Ghulam had demonstrated the highest level of individual excellence and achievement, and that the province of Ontario had benefited greatly from his work as a volunteer, community builder, and community leader. Dr. Sajjad Ibrahim, in his recommendation letter, referred, among other things, to Ghulam's selfless commitment to the cause of humanity, to Ghulam spearheading the affordable housing project known as the Crescent Village, and his continued involvement with the project since its inception, and mentioned the many awards Ghulam had received, including the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal in 2002, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Quarter Century Club of the Ontario Government in 2005, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Universal Muslim Association of America in 2011, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012, and the Mosaic Interfaith Award, which was accorded to him in 2013 when he stepped down from his position as a co-chair after over 30 years of service. What a way to live a life. It is truly said that a life well lived leaves a gentle pattern on the hearts of all, and the world is a better and lovelier place because one person touched it with warmth and goodness and grace. Thank you, Ghulam, for your services and your friendship. Al-Fatiha.
Thank you, Uncle Bashir, for those lovely remarks. We really appreciate both you and Uncle Ali Raza for taking the time to share your reflections about Dad. Now, while we were putting this program together, I was asked if there was any fund or scholarship set up in memory of my father that people could donate to. So I just wanted to share that my family has actually set up a fund with the Olive Tree Foundation here in Canada. It's a registered charity, and we specifically selected to fund any projects that improve the condition or image of Muslims in Canada, from policy think tanks to research or charitable initiatives. So if anyone's interested, I'm just going to paste the link in the chat box, and I'll just share that for all of you. Now I'd like for us to turn our attention to a really important issue which has recently been making international news and has been happening for many years. If you knew Dad, you knew that he did his best to be an advocate against injustice wherever it happened. And in that spirit, I've asked Brother Dilmurat from the Uyghur community to shed some light on the unthinkable and inhuman situation of Muslims in China, our Uyghur sisters and brothers who are imprisoned in China today, and those who are displaced as refugees. So I will now hand over the floor to Brother Dilmurat, who is joining us from Montreal. Okay, go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks a lot for giving special attention to the Uyghurs. I would like to talk about the Uyghur situation briefly within 5 minutes. And I have some slides, like a few slides, and I would like to show that. And those slides, maybe I can share. Oh, yes. Can you able? Yeah, I'm disabled.
You're disabled, okay. So share.
Because.
Okay, there you go. You should be able to do it now.
Quickly. Yes. Yes. I think slideshow. Yes. Okay. So I would like to speak about the Uyghurs who have been on the front lines of all major media outlets these days. I work for the new organization called International Support for Uyghurs, and I'm at McGill right now doing my PhD. First of all, let's look at the the map. So Uyghurs, Uyghurs live in East Turkestan, which is the borderland area of China. You can see Tibet on the south. East Turkestan is bordered with 8 different countries, and strategically, it's a very important location for China. That's why the Chinese government doesn't want to lose this special territory. If you look at brief history of Uyghurs, Uyghurs ethnically Turkic. They've been following Islam since the 10th century. Uyghurs established numerous countries before being occupied by Manchurian China. You can yes, 18th century, Manchu Empire annexed Uyghur territory into China. During the 20th century, Uyghurs established twice independence: East Turkestan Islamic Republic and East Turkestan Republic. In 1949, Communist China occupied East Turkestan. Currently, Uyghurs have become one of the 55 ethnic minority groups in China. So recent developments are quite dark. Since 9/11, we all know about this global war on terror rhetoric coming from the West. Chinese Communist government has used this rhetoric to suppress Uyghur resistance to the Chinese state. All Uyghur resistance has been labeled as terrorism. And most recently, as I'm sure all of you know about the infamous re-education camps, which have been continuously built in East Turkestan since 2017. Currently, between 1 to 3 million Uyghurs or other Muslim groups have been incarcerated in those camps. So these are some pictures. You can see there's no difference between these camps and a kind of normal everyday prison. Some of the very lucky prison internment camp survivors have been giving their testimonies. As you can see, their stories are heartbreaking. We can see that these re-education camps, just like Nazi camps, which were the dark part of human history. And these pictures also, these pictures have been leaked recently, and they show that some of the people, some Uyghurs, have been detained, and they are on the way to be sent to some of the camps. I would like to here highlight the the very dark reality, which is about halal organ harvesting. This news has been going on the news in recent times. You can see some countries in the Middle East, some people from the Middle East, Muslims from Middle East, they have been involved in this kind of scandal. Chinese government is harvesting Uyghur organs and selling these to the Muslims in the Middle East. And thousands of mosques have been demolished in recent 2 years. This mosque was built in the 13th century in East Turkestan, which was demolished last year. And these are some satellite images. You can see before and after images. Before and after, you don't see anything here. It was demolished again, this one and this one. And how about other people? These detainees, some detainees have been released, but they are becoming factory slave workers. These slave workers are related to some famous brands, which are being consumed in the West. And forced sterilization of Uyghur women has been happening as well in the last few years. According to some statistics, Uyghur population dropped by 60%, the Uyghur birth rate dropped by 60% in the last few years, while the national Chinese average was only 4%. So finally, I would like to highlight that we shouldn't be bystanders, especially as part of Muslim Ummah. We shouldn't stay silent while most of the Muslim countries are staying silent. We shouldn't. We should push our governments to confront the Chinese atrocities against the Uyghur people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brother Dilmurat. I really appreciate you sharing this information with us. If anyone listening today is part of an organization, I encourage you to arrange a program on this issue if you haven't already. Feel free to connect with Brother Dilmurat or anyone else you know working on this issue. Brother Dilmurat will be staying for the program, so if you have any questions for him, you can ask towards the end of the program. This issue, unfortunately, there's just so much to it that I myself personally, I'm ashamed of how unaware I've been. For instance, through conversation with Brother Dilmurat, I even learned that some of the PPEs we wear here in North America, they come from China and they're made by forced labor from our very own sisters and brothers who are in these camps. And interesting to note, also in conversation, we've learned that Zoom, this very platform that we're using, is often surveilled by the Chinese government. So we were suggested that from moving forward, perhaps we can use American platforms like WebEx instead. So something for us as a community to consider. I know we've become very accustomed to Zoom, and they're probably listening to us too. So hello, everyone who shouldn't be listening. But just thought I'd put that out there. So thank you, brother. Appreciate that. And now it gives me great honor to introduce one of our main speakers today, Shaykh Arif Abdul Hussain, who is joining us from Birmingham, UK. Shaykh Arif needs no introduction, but he is, as you know, an incredible thinker, writer, and teacher in our midst. He is the founder and director of the Al-Mahdi Institute in Birmingham, UK. Without further ado, Shaykh Arif, if you can please unmute yourself, the floor is now yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can we recite Surah Fatiha for our dear, beloved Marhum and for all the unfortunate souls around the world who are experiencing difficulties and are under the yoke of oppression, as we have just heard, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring relief to them. Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Can you see me properly, Fatima?
Yes, there. I think the background that usually shows up behind you, it's sort of juxtaposed on your shirt. It looks like you're wearing a very nice shirt. So,
oh, yes.
Yeah. Something to consider for the Institute to make, maybe some merchandise. But
I was wondering what this is. This is Rabbi, right? My Lord.
I think it's a sign, Shaykh. It's a shot.
Well, something for my dear family, the Khoja family, to think about.
Yes.
So I can't remove it because I don't know how to. Just brief thoughts here on our human condition and what really I feel is happening. When we come into this world, we are born in a given cradle, as if there is a factory which produces babies. And these babies are raw. They go to a particular place and it's asked, okay, which color should we add on this particular one? Black, white, brown. So these colors are added. Then another place they go, which gender should we assign this particular baby? Male or female? Then they go to another place. Now, which family should we give this child to? Which location? In which time frame should we take this child to? Now, that child, in its essence, is no different to anybody else. All these features are added upon that baby and they are sent to a household. In that household, obviously, they have their culture, they have their religion, they have their ways and their practices, their own social and economical statuses. So that child, in essence, that was none of these things, now awakens a fully packaged child with artificial wrappings that are nothing to do with its essence. And that child grows up thinking that I am male or I am female, I am black or I am white, I am rich, I am poor, I'm a socialist, I'm a capitalist, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian. And that is how the child grows up for the rest of that child's life. Of course, during the process of life, then we begin to think and we say, at least for us people who advocate the existence of a God and a higher purpose, that God has to be one. And then we think deeply into ourselves and we say, well, God cannot be anything less than the most splendid one. If we look deep within ourselves, we will find a perfect definition of God. A beautiful, kind, loving, forgiving, merciful God. A God that the inner being aspires to become. Then we ask ourselves, well, who is the author of everything? And the answer comes, the same God. We look deeper into humanity and we say, well, hold on. God is one. Humanity is one. The variety is arbitrary. Where are we headed to? We are all headed to a state of completion for ourselves and humanity at large. It is at that time that we finally awaken to the truth that everything that we know about ourselves or we have identified with and held so close to our heart is actually a fleeting feature of ours. The essential feature is something else, that we are indeed one people with one destiny. Here then comes the question of, well, why are we so divided on the lines of religion, that I'm better and you are not, and I'm heading towards salvation and you are heading towards damnation? We quickly begin to understand that even these notions are quite redundant. They do not really make sense. We ask immediately, what is the end goal of religion? If somebody says it's going into paradise, then we will say, well, it doesn't really make sense. Even paradise is a bodily identity. It cannot sustain us. Just as through an intellectual process, we begin to lose association with our bodily features, that I am not really the nose or the color or the gender of my body. Similarly, we begin to lose the notion that I'm not really this religion. There is something else quite profound that is there, which is nagging away at me, and I can't put my finger on it. So even if we say there is salvation and there is paradise, you will say, well, how can paradise be an end? It is a place where you will rejoice. It's a nice place, obviously. Everybody wants to go there. But is this where I truly belong? The answer is not really. And then you talk about hell. And you say, but wait a minute. How can hell be permanent? And how can God, who is so merciful, create a hell in the first place? If anything, hell is as transient as this life of the earth. It is nothing to do with God in essence. It is nothing to do with us in essence. How can God, who is so merciful, become so vengeful, so unforgiving? This is not the God I would want to worship. At least I can think of a better God than this God. And if I can think of a better God than this vengeful, merciless God, then that means that the God that is really there is beyond this heaven and hell God. We begin to understand that there is something quite phenomenal going on. And we are wrapped up in something that is quite alien and quite false. The truth awaits to awaken from deep within ourselves. The question comes, well, Prophet Muhammad was the best of the prophets, no doubt. But was he a human or not? He was a human. So therefore, the truth that he was giving was a human truth. And if it's a human truth, then it's common to one and all. So then I ask another question. Well, what about one who does not believe in Prophet Muhammad, but believes in all the values that the Prophet Muhammad shared with us? Does he believe in the essence of Prophet Muhammad as espoused by somebody else? Or deep within his soul, they have arisen from himself? You will say yes. I will say here, the being of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is secondary. The truth that he imparted is fundamental. And that truth is shared equally across the board. What do we learn from Prophet Muhammad in essence? Do we learn how to do ruku and how to do sajda and how to go around the house of God? The Prophet Muhammad has taught us that these are mere preludes to the real thing that I am teaching. Through sajda, through ruku, I wanted to awaken you to yourself and to your God and to your higher purpose. Through ruku, the only thing you are supposed to understand is that this head will not bow to any ego, arrogance, desires, or to false authorities. It will only bow to the most supreme one. Through sajda, I was teaching you that you will prefer the will of the most beautiful one over your restricted will. Now, when I look at that, then I ask him, what about zakat? Through zakat, he said, I was teaching you to care for the other, to lose the love of this world from your soul. When we ask him through fast, he said, I was teaching you to become free of your bodily dictates. Your mind can start thinking, you can start reflecting. Then I say, well, I go to a Buddhist. They have arrived at the same truth in essence that the Prophet Muhammad was teaching through the prayer fasting system of this world. When I go to a Hindu, he will say, all your truths have been depicted in our figures here. Christians will say, your truths have been depicted in the form of Jesus. Jews will say in the form of our prophets and Moses and in the teachings of Nabi Musa. In fact, even if you go to those people who are not acquainted with these lofty people that we are acquainted with, they too aspire to the same values. We quickly begin to see, actually, it is one thing that is going on. There is one God, one humanity, one purpose, and we are awakening to it. At this point in time, humanity is still in its infantile stages, where we are fighting like babies and kids. Once we get tired of fighting, once we grow up, we will see, actually, no, there is something quite profound going on here. And we need to awaken to that truth when that lofty truth dawns upon the soul, fighting, quarreling becomes a petty pursuit. We start directing ourselves to that noble goal and to that noble end. That is where humanity is supposed to be. Now, I often say to the Muslim community that you guys curse the Zionists so much and you say destroy them. That's not going to end the problem, because the Zionist that is reflected to you in those people, the same value is in there in your own souls. The answer is not in killing people, condemning people. The answer is in humanity together remedying itself. And it cannot remedy itself until there is a sense of a loftier objective. Until and unless humanity can arrive at a sense of a lofty objective where humanity needs to belong, we will not be able to resolve our differences. So then comes the question, well, why do we not realize this? The problem is the state of indoctrination. We are so heavily indoctrinated and we are so insecure from within ourselves that we feel we need an identity, we need security within ourselves. I often ask my Muslim friends, you are a Muslim, you're a believer of the Prophet and the family of the Prophet. Why are you so afraid of dying? Why are you unsure of what is to come? You are on the truth, you're worshipping Allah, you're giving your zakat and charity, you're fasting, you're going to the Majlis, you're doing all these things. You are proving how every other religion is wrong apart from yours. You've got it right. Why are you so afraid? The very fact that you're afraid from within shows it's a testimonial that you haven't found yourself. You haven't found your God. I haven't found my God. I haven't found myself. But this insecurity, this false sense of security that we have, that we want, and the false sense of salvation, that is the thing that is totally deluding us. How do we get there? How do we remove these shackles? Actually, the odd thing is that even on the day of Qiyamah, we will be no different to the way that we are today. The conversation that we have with God on that day is very much similar to the way we relate to God on this earth. I mean, you find those verses in which God questions and human people lie, and then God brings witnesses. It's a very much worldly sort of an affair that is going on the day of Qiyamah. We are none the wiser there. I mean, there's only Isa, Salamullah alayhi, and the great prophets of God who say to Allah, well, you know what is in my soul. You don't need to ask me, you know. But the rest of us will probably be quarreling there and fighting and saying to God, well, the evidences are wrong, and cross-examine them, and whatever else we do here, we'll be doing there. Even after that great cosmic collapse, we'll be none the wiser. So how do you get there? How do we actually arrive and remove these shackles? By the way, I'm not saying don't pray, don't fast, don't do Hajj. I'm saying do all of these things and do them even more, because they are very potent. And the Blessed Prophet Muhammad has given us the best way to spiritually connect with the Prophet, with Allah. And Salah and Zakat and Siyam, as we discussed in the Majlis series, have been given by every Prophet. These are the fundamentals of relieving our minds from the bodily restrictions and to free them. So how do we actually get there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes huge mention of calmly remembering Allah continuously, going into meditation, chanting of the names of Allah, and reflecting upon nature, reflecting upon our own existence. Now here it is. In the name of religion, the devotee is shackled. Truly, the devotee has shifted a level of insecurity into what he feels, into a level of security. What he doesn't know is he's still shackled, because the worship of God is to liberate us from any fear. set us free, allow us to arrive at our own truth, to find who we are, to find where we are. The fact that we are fighting, the fact that we are not ready to accept the truth, the fact that we have to defend our religion shows that we are not there. And religion, we have used it as we use every other system to give false sense of security, but we are not awakening. The prescription that God gives is clear. Reflect upon nature. Look at the human history. Look at the heavens above. Look at nature. Look at how beautifully everything is arranged. Look at life. Look at death. Think about it. If you look at the universe, which is approximately 14 billion years old, which is our universe, now we know for a fact that this could be a mere flicker within the whole cosmic scheme. A little flicker results in a 14 billion year old universe, which is infinite and expanding and limitless stars, in which there are so many planets just in our galaxy that baffles the mind, in which there is a little Earth, which is not even a speck of dust, on which are 8 billion people. Think about it carefully. Think about it carefully. Can the whole story of the existence of human being be confined to such pettiness that I'm on this world and I have to establish truth and I go in the hereafter and I'm in paradise? Can that be the story? We need to think about it to get that sense of the loftier existence. Imam Mahdi had once said that a person who observes the might of God begins to forget the petty involvements of the earth, begins to lose himself in God. They have no concern for power and wealth and establishing the truth or not. The only problem is that this same Imam Mahdi taught us that the human story is a collective story and we all have to get it right somehow. So we have social reformers in the form of all the prophets. In any case, to remember Allah constantly, whether we do it by the name Allah, or the Hindus do it by the name Om, or the monks in their monasteries sing, or the Buddhists in their own way, they chant and breathe. All of us need to be in sync with that beautiful name of God so that he can start to awaken from within. To reflect upon nature so that the shackles upon the mind can begin to break. 3, religion, which was supposed to liberate us but has shackled us, those shackles can break. The prison, which is the most formidable prison, is the prison that has been justified by the mind, and none more so than religion. Religion is a prison. But if we can arrive from religion into religion, then that is the most liberating point ever. So in essence, my 15 minutes are finished. In essence, we are one humanity. We have one God. We have one end. That end is so noble, that paradise does not make any sense if it is to be the eternal goal. If paradise is meant to be another lengthy passage through which we pass, then it makes sense. But a noble being like a human being cannot spend an entire lifetime in the want of paradise. A noble human being has to spend the entirety of the lifetime in discovering the beauty unending in the name of God. I leave us with one thought. It's a strange world. We worship God, we spent all our life trying to do good, we will go into paradise, yet nobody will awaken to the fundamental truth. Who am I? What is it all about? Why should I be here? Why should there even be a paradise? That is the fundamental truth to which we need to awaken. If we look at it this way, then we find that life is a phenomenal opportunity for us to awaken and to contribute in the most meaningful way. For me, the oppressor is as much in need of mercy as the oppressed. Because until and unless the oppressor does not become merciful, humanity is failing. Beyond the aggressive approach, maybe humanity has come of age where we can share the beauty of each other. The Blessed Prophet did not go with an aggressive approach. He went with a sympathetic soul. He expressed the truth. He tried to awaken them. And then he created a glorious ummah. I will leave us with the words of Hussain ibn Ali. What a phenomenal being. He is truly universal. If we are ever lost for purpose, the real purpose, we just need to look at this man. Humanity at large will find meaning with him. At the end of his life, when everything is taken away from him, thirst, hunger is about to kill him. His body is torn whilst he is still alive. He utters these phenomenal words. He turns himself to God and he says, "Oh Allah, you are the one most near. You are the one who responds to me whenever I call upon you. Oh Allah, there is none that I trust but you, and there is none worthy of devotion but you. O Lord, know full well that I wholesomely embrace your destiny, and willingly I am surrendered to your command." Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Shaykh Arif. That was such a beautiful and important lesson for us. Really needed to hear that. Thank you so much. Now we will hear from Dr. Liyakat Takim, who is joining us from Mississauga, Ontario. Dr. Takim is another incredible thinker and author in our midst. He is a professor at McMaster University and is a Sharjah Chair in Global Islam at McMaster. Dr. Takim, if you can kindly unmute yourself, the floor is now yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullah. Wa alaikum salam. I promise not to be as controversial as Shaykh Arif. In fact, I promise to be even more controversial. In any case, we have about 15 minutes, and I wanted to share a few thoughts with you. First of all, let me say this much, that Marhum Ghulam Sajan, whom I knew very well, would have been proud of such an occasion. He was not one to kind of get into the traditional kind of majlis. He wants to have something which is interactive, dialogue, even controversial, as long as it makes people think. That was important for Ghulam Sajan. What I want to talk to you briefly about is the question of the connection between law and custom. Is law affected by custom? Is custom affected by law? Many of us seem to think that Islamic law, the laws that we have, are divine completely, untouched by human beings. The question that I have for you then is, if Islamic law is truly divine and completely divine, Why is it that there are so many differences between people, between the mujtahids, between Sunnis and Shias, between Sunnis themselves and between Shias themselves? Would God reveal one part of his law to one person, one group, and another part to another? Or why would he make the laws so different so that they start quarreling and fighting amongst each other? The fact of the matter is this, that at least early in the beginning of Islam, and I would say even now, law and custom were and still are deeply intertwined. In other words, law is framed by custom. And I will go ahead and show you how. Custom, when we say custom in Arabic, we use the term urf. Urf or custom are the social norms, the practices by a society even before the coming of law. In many ways then, the custom that came with Islam came even before Islam. That's why we have three kinds of injunctions or three kinds of laws, shall we say. Some are those which are called ta'sisi. Ta'sisi laws are those which Islam actually instituted, which it began. And these are primarily in terms of the ibadat, prayers, fasting, Hajj, although Hajj was there even before the coming of Islam. And many other ritual laws were those laws which Islam instituted. Then there were those which are Islahi laws. Islahi laws are those which Islam found but tweaked, changed them a little bit, modified. But most of our social laws, and bear in mind social laws, are those laws which Islam inherited. Islam was not reactionary. It did not say that because this law is pre-Islamic, therefore we have to do with it and change it. No, it only changed those laws where there were a problem with it. If a law worked perfectly fine, it was within the compass or ethical vision of the Quran, Islam did not touch it. And therefore, most of our laws are called in Arabic imzai. Imzai means endorsed laws, laws which Islam endorsed. Some people say that up to 90% of the laws, social laws in Islam are these endorsed laws. So for example, laws on marriages, the kinds of marriages that we have now, Islam did not introduce them. Islam actually inherited them. Laws on diya, that is blood money. If a person dies, how much money you should give in retribution for that. Business laws, these are laws, as I said, which are actually borrowed laws. What does it tell us? That the customs and even the laws that we have now are actually laws that were practiced by non-Muslims, pagans, even before the coming of Islam, that Islam adopted with certain conditions. What else does it tell us? That just because something is pre-Islamic does not mean that it's un-Islamic. If it's pre-Islamic, it does not necessarily mean it's un-Islamic. We have to understand also that laws develop within a particular context. An Islamic law, the Sharia that we call it, was actually framed by and governed by the existing culture. To put it differently, the culture that Islam found when it started off set the parameters of the law. The law, most of Islamic law was not based by new divinely revealed laws. On the contrary, most of the laws in Islam were based on modifying or approving existing laws, as I've said. What does it also tell us? That just because something is non-Islamic does not mean it's un-Islamic either. Just because something is non-Islamic, it doesn't mean that it's un-Islamic either. And therefore we find that in many, many cases, and I'll give you a few examples, as Islam expanded, it appropriated and borrowed local laws, foreign laws, rather than just neglect them or negate them. Today, for example, in Islam, we have things which are totally foreign to Islam. But just because something is foreign to Islam does not mean it's against Islam. Domes, almost every mosque that you know of has a dome on it. Where did this dome come from? The domes were not there during the time of the Prophet. There were no minarets. There were no niches. even that crescent that we use as a symbol of Islam, are not mentioned in any of the early texts or Islamic books that we have. Indeed, I will go even further, that there is nothing sacred or even Islamic of many of the pre-Islamic laws that Islam itself appropriated and endorsed. There were many things which when we think about today, so there's nothing Islamic about this. Islam accepted it because it worked for that particular time. Within that cultural framework, within that society that Islam had in front of it, these laws work perfectly fine. But does not mean that those laws are to be immutable, unchangeable, or universal and eternal. So just to give you a few examples, and forgive me for being so direct and blunt, but you can blame Marhum Ghulam Sajan for that, because he told me that you have to say it what it's like. You don't need to sugarcoat it. Fine, we'll not sugarcoat it. So there are laws in Islam which say, for example, that a female slave does not have to cover herself. In fact, she must not cover herself. No hijab for the female slave. Even in namaz also, even in salat, a female slave does not need to cover herself. And you may ask why? I mean, if it's hijab, it should be there for every woman, correct? And the answer is because female slaves were a class under other women. In order to show who is a free woman and who is a slave woman, female slaves were not allowed, or were in some cases discouraged, to wear hijab. There are other laws that we might find rather problematic, even in today's world. FGMs, that is female genital mutilation, was allowed at one point in Islam, and according to many books are allowed until today. Slavery, for example, or the treatment of non-Muslims. There are other laws which I personally find problematic, that a woman, for example, cannot inherit the land that her husband has. So if he, for example, bequeaths a house after he dies, so she can have the house, or at least part of it, but she cannot have the land on which the house is. So I don't know where, I haven't seen a house floating about in the air so far at least. Similarly, when Islam went to Persia, there was a local pre-Islamic custom that women had to cover their face, niqab or burqa, whatever we may want to call it. Allama Mutahari says that this was borrowed from Iranian culture, nothing to do with Islam. And yet what was clearly an Iranian cultural phenomenon, with time, it became part of Islamic law. Because if you look at the Masail or some of the books of law that we have today, it says it is ihtiyat, wujubi, a precautionary measure that a woman covers the entire face. It's not wajib, by the way, but it's ihtiyat. I would like to go further than just talking of pre-Islamic laws. I want to say this much, that if we restrict ourselves today in 21st century Western countries, or even Eastern countries for that matter, if we restrict ourselves to the inherited laws, we will continue to live by the laws of 7th and 8th century Arabia. Let me rephrase that so that it becomes clear of what I'm saying. That if we restrict ourselves to the laws that we have inherited, then we will continue to live in 7th or 8th century Arabia. We will not be able to live in 21st century. We do not have to apply the old laws, which many of them were generated by pre-Islamic laws. Rather, we can use the old laws that we have inherited as a guideline, as a framework for new ones. Laws change based on customs, my friends. When customs change, the laws change too, something that we need to be aware of. To give you an example, at the coming of Islam, the mahar, or mahriye as they call it in Persian, the mahar was given at the time of the nikah, even before the marriage was consummated. If a woman claims, for example, that she did not get the mahar in those days, then the onus was on her to produce the evidence that she did not get the mahar. Why? Because the custom was that she would get the mahar at the time of the marriage. If you fast forward to the time of the Shahidul Awal or Shahidul Thani, in the medieval period, the custom had changed. Now the custom was that the mahar could be given much later on or could never be given, although mahar has to be given, by the way. I hope all the men are listening to this. And if the women, if your husband has not given your mahar, you better make sure that he does. In any case, then the custom changed in the medieval period, whereby the mahar could be deferred to a later period. Now, if the woman claimed that she did not receive the mahar, now the law changed. Now it was, the onus was on the husband. Before it was on the wife. Now the onus was on the husband to show that he had actually given the mahar. Why? Because the custom had changed. Custom has changed so that the mahar could be given later on, and therefore the law changed also, that now she doesn't have to show that she had received the mahar. He had to show that he had given the mahar. And the law also differed on where you were in an early period of Islam. So for example, this is coming from a Sunni context, and to some degree it bears testament even to our law. If you were living in Kufa, Kufa was very cosmopolitan in those days, in the 7th, 8th centuries, much like Toronto. You have the Greeks, you have all these kind of different kind of people there. If a woman wanted to get married, the question was, does she need the permission of her guardian? And the answer was no, in Kufa. Because Kufa was cosmopolitan, the law was framed by the custom. But if the same woman was in Medina, and Medina was very Arab in character, if that same woman was in Medina and she wanted to get married, then according to Arab custom, she had to have permission of her guardian, even if she was what we call Rashida, meaning that she was able to think on her own, she was well connected, she was even 40 years old. And pardon the language, as long as she was a virgin, she needed the permission of her guardian. And by the way, the guardian was always male, never a woman, not the mother. Normally the guardian is the father or the grandfather. And if there's a clash between the two, between the father and the grandfather, then who has the last say? Not what you think, it's the grandfather. What I'm trying to say is these laws worked well, but they worked well according to a particular point in time. What we have done is that we have treated these culturally specific laws, which worked very well at one time, we have made them immutable. We have made them universal. You know one thing? The Quran uses the term al-ma'ruf many a time. Amra bil ma'ruf. You do this according to ma'ruf. What is this ma'ruf? Ma'ruf means that which is commonly accepted, that which is proper according to the needs of the time. Nowhere does the Quran says ma'ruf means what was accepted at the time of the coming of Islam in the 7th or 8th centuries. It doesn't say that. It says, especially when you treat your women, it says, وَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. You live with them according to the proper way of living with people, in kindness and in love. And if you cannot live with them in such ways, then set them free. Do not them hold as hostages in marriages. So what is happening is that we are using past rulings based on custom rather than the God-given reasoning to deal with issues now. Allah has given us this, akal, to think, but instead of using the akal, we use the nakal, as it's called. Nakal is what is transmitted. Akal is what we have up here, our akili. So we prefer what is transmitted, the nakal, than the akal. And we have so many laws which are problematic even today. And when we raise these issues, then we are immediately cast down. We are told that you are this and Western influence and this and that. The truth is, these are there, and you can easily, very easily use the G word, Google it. So, for example, we have laws in our books today which say that you must preserve the life of a Muslim. If you find a Muslim dying, you have to help him. But if it was a non-Muslim, it's good to help him, but you don't have to. You can let him die. I mean, if you find somebody is dying, you don't go and ask him, are you a Muslim or not Muslim? You go and help them because that is the right thing to do. You're following the Quran. The Quran says you save one human being, you save the whole of humanity. It doesn't say if you save one Muslim. My friends, I know my time is running short, but my passing and final thoughts are this, that urf or custom is not infinite. It is bound by the local period and by the local custom itself. We cannot use those laws which are based on 7th century custom and treat them as infinite and eternal. If we do that, then we'll have to accept slavery. We'll have to accept so many other laws that I've told you that have problems within them. The Quran does not restrict the question of custom to 7th century Arabia. We do that. The Quran does not say that because we endorse these laws, therefore these laws are eternal till the end of time. Those laws which the Quran introduced, yes, they are. But those laws which the Quran endorsed and sanctioned because they work at that time are not necessarily eternal. Otherwise, as I said, we have so many different problems with laws regarding slavery, regarding FGMs and so on. Basic values, and we have to distinguish between values and laws. Values are those which talk of honesty, of justice, of loyalty, of courage, and so on. Those values don't change. Values do not change, laws do. And because if we start working along this way of thinking, that what I'm advocating, then we'll find that a lot of our laws now will change. Because in our books, we still have laws about child marriages, that a guardian can perform the marriage of his child, or the male or female, without even asking him or her. And once he performs that marriage, and I said normally the guardian is always either the father or the grandfather. Once the guardian performs that child marriage, the child has no way of annulling it. Some say yes, when they grow up, then they might, but most of them say no, because it's the guardian performed it, the child has to abide by it. In conclusion then, Islam came to free our mind, not to freeze it. The more we open our minds to the Quran, the more the Quran will open itself to our minds. My friends, revelation is open. Our minds are closed and narrow. We should let the Quran speak to us rather than us speaking to the Quran. We cannot limit Allah to 7th century Arabia. Again, we cannot limit Allah to 7th century Arabia because an eternal God speaks eternally. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Takim. That was very insightful. And thank you for speaking such truth about how we need to rethink many customs and laws. There's an expression called braving the wilderness, and it sounds like that's what you've done. So good thing you're locked at home at this current time. Now we will open up the floor for any questions you may have for our esteemed panel. And in case anyone has questions for Brother Dilmurat on the Uyghur issue, you can use this opportunity to ask him as well. I see we have a question here in the chat box from Dr. Minaz Qasim. So she's saying that she totally accepts and endorses Dr. Takim's message on discrepancy between laws and customs. Her question is the way forward and how can we help?
Yeah, I thought that all the questions were going to Shaykh Arif, you know. Yeah, no, seriously though, I think because of lack of time, I did not get a chance to, suggest some of the remedies. But in brief, we need, this is the whole purpose. And by the way, I'm writing a book on this, almost done with it. We need to think and rethink the law. In other words, ijtihad is not only to formulate a law, but also to reformulate it. And therefore, based on the basic values, based on the basic outline or ethical notions in the Quran, we can rethink the laws on two grounds. One is the custom of our time here rather than pre-Islamic custom, and B, what is called Siratul Uqala. Siratul Uqala meaning things that all rational human beings agree upon. All rational human beings will agree now, at least, that a mother should have a right to decide on the guardianship, on the fate of her daughter or her son, not just the father. This is just one example. All rational human beings will agree today that slavery is wrong. Now, just because it was there in the Quran, etc., because it persisted at that time, does not mean that in today's world, especially as our perception of what is just, of what is proper, what is moral has changed. That does not mean that we go around modifying laws hither the way that we like it. No, this has to be done by a group of specialists, but specialists who actually are able to reinterpret law according to the needs of the time. And I'm not the only one who says this, by the way. A lot of ulama and ayatollahs coming from Qum and Najaf are saying it.
Thank you. I have a hand raised here by Dr. Hussain Kimji. Hussain Uncle, would you like to say something?
Yes, okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I have to run very quickly because I have to leave at about 4 o'clock exactly, so I've only about 3 or 4 minutes. So you can take it as a question or as a comment. So my question or comment is really referring to both Dr. Arif and also Dr. Liyakat Takim. I think really that the real problem that we have is that, that we have not been able to distinguish between faith and reason. That's the problem. So, because, faith is, eternal. Reason can change according to the situation, according to the condition. My particular question to Dr. Arif is, also this, that, that when a Hindu person who is doing a sajda to Om, and a Muslim person doing the sajda and saying, Subhana Rabbil A'la wa bihamdi, can these both be same? They can be both be same. I would agree with you. If a Hindu person doing a sajda to Om also believes in what Yajur Veda says, Yajur Veda, their own book, the book of scripture says, Natasya Pratima Asti. Natasya Pratima Asti, simply means that there is no image of him, there is no image of the God. So although that I'm doing my siddha to Om, I'm not doing siddha to one who I believe to be God, because there is no image of real God. So unless the Hindu really does the siddha with that near knowing, then, perhaps, the question, can be debated with you, Dr. Arif. But with, Liyakat, thank you so much. The problem I find really is, that we must be able to divide between faith and reason. And until Muslims learn that, it will be very, very difficult. And I've got one more very quick question to Brother Dilmurat Mehmut as well. Thank you so much for enlightening us with the situation. I'm really very concerned about this. But do you have any ideas as to what can we do? What I see is even the Muslim countries, even Islamic countries are very friendly with China. Iran is very friendly with China. Pakistan is friendly with China. So how are we going to deal with a situation like that? Thank you so very, very much. Thank you, Sister Fatima, for all the help. Thank you.
So I think Sheikh Arif, you're on mute. You can unmute yourself now. Oh, you can, no? Oh, you're still on mute, Sheikh Arif. 1 second, ask to unmute. Okay, try now, please. It's still not working. Oh no, you are unmuted now. You should be unmuted. Ask to unmute. Ask to unmute.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
I think maybe that was divine intervention for me to keep quiet, actually. Dr. Kimji, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for that wonderful question. You see, human truth is one truth. It's one story that has been flowing throughout. We are all experiencing the same truth from different angles and different aspects. Nobody is doing sajda to other than God, and nobody is doing sajda to God as well. We are all after the ultimate, and we are all in the process of exploration. So I know, epistemically, we need to establish historically what was true, what was myth. Epistemically, we need to come to this understanding of the nature of God. But inevitably, all these endeavors fall short, even if a Muslim thinks with the sharpest rationality They will not arrive at an understanding of God and how things are. If looked at that way, you can say two things. That yes, one has understood more accurately than the other one. Nonetheless, all of them are wrong equally. The other thing we understand is that in essence, they are all after the same thing. And just one more note, that all these myths that the Hindus have are not to be dismissed. These myths have some backing factually in the history and story of humanity. And the Quran leaves so many signs there in the verses everywhere for us to explore those meanings and to say, wait a minute, what the Hindus were saying, what the Assyrians were saying, what the Sumerians were saying, what the Jews are saying, what is contained within the Old Testament and some of their books, they all have indications within the Quran somehow. So it's a singular story. Now, when you say faith, faith is ultimately based in accordance with what we understand to be the truth. So this distinction that we make between what we understand through the mind and how we commit ourselves, it's not altogether a sharp distinction. Whatever we understand, we commit ourselves to. So that distinction is not really a real distinction. I do not believe that any Muslim is worshipping Allah. That's my honest opinion. Yes? We worship a notion of God that is not really God. But in the process of getting there, hopefully we will take one small step so that those who come after us will be a little bit more enlightened through the memory that is passed through the DNA to them, and humanity might come to fruition. I do not believe at all that there is, in essence, any discrepancy between any two human beings, and I do not believe any single Muslim to be internally more aligned with God than anybody else. That's my brief answer.
All right, thank you, Shaykh Arif. I think there was a question for Dr. Takim as well as Brother Dilmurat. So if you'd like to take the next one, Dr. Takim.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, very briefly, because I know we are running short of time. One of the things that I was not able to introduce because of the lack of time was the role of reason in all of this. It's what I call moral rationalism. In other words, when we are talking of re-examining and revisiting some of these laws, what we need to use is not only morality or our understanding of ethics, but also reason. Why? Because we, especially the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, believe that reason comes even before revelation. In other words, we know something right on what is wrong based on our own reasoning, not because Allah told us or because the Prophet told us. Okay? So based on that, then we can argue that moral rationalist thinking will be a very important and a very cogent tool for reformation. I just wanted to address one other question which I found on the chat, if I may, which is the question of FGM, that it was cultural, not in religious. The reality is, even though it was cultural, but it has found itself in our books. So therefore you find, and it's even on the internet, is found that some of the most prominent ulama have said that it is actually okay to do it. Now we have problems, and I certainly have problems with it, whatever we may say, but this is another classic example of how something that was clearly customary, certainly not mentioned in the Quran, something that was customary has found itself in the law books itself.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Takim. Brother Dilmurat?
Thank you, Dr. Kimji, for that question, which is very heavy. We keep asking this question. I believe Muslim governments, they are afraid of China, which is reality. And I think this is a kind of big test for the Muslim world. We believe that when if we keep raising awareness among the Muslim populations in those countries, I believe they support justice. So if we keep on doing our job, I believe that Muslim communities in those countries can influence their governments one day, and then justice will be done for the Uyghurs. Yeah, thank you. We should be hopeful, inshallah.
Inshallah. I know here, Brother Dilmurat, we spoke about in Canada, we have a member of parliament, Garnet Jennings, who is part of a special envoy on the issue, working on making it a part of Canadian government's federal agenda. So I think that's definitely a start, but you're right, we have to keep talking about this issue and praying for our brothers and sisters. I just wanted to flag for everyone that we are running past our time. So if you'll excuse me, I think we'll, if there's no other questions, I think we'll just conclude the program. If I have your
there is one question I've seen on the chat. If I can address it very briefly.
Of course, go ahead, please.
Yes, from Murtaza Mewawala, that he says that he thought that the child marriage was a way out of saving a girl from being buried alive. No, that's not necessarily the case. The child marriage was a custom. So even after, because the Islam came in immediately, prohibited female infanticide, the cutting, the burying of female girls. So that was one of the earliest laws that was passed. But this idea of child marriage continued, was very prevalent, and according to the law books, is still okay even today, according to our law books. And, as I said, that this may have been a kind of a cultural thing, that many times the parents were worried if there are many girls, who would marry their girls, so therefore just give their girls away when they are little children. And in those days, it may have been fine. But certainly in today's world, we cannot accept it. And unfortunately, as I said, such ideas still permeate our books.
All right, thank you, Dr. Takim. I think now we will conclude our program with your permission. And I will ask, before I ask actually Brother Abdul Aziz Theoji to doing closing dua for us, just wanted to thank once again Dr. Takim, Shaykh Arif, Brother Dilmurat for joining us. I think it's really important, as you've all mentioned, that these are topics that are often, we don't speak about them, but I think one of the themes we can take away today is, unshackle our mind, be free, and speak truth. So inshallah, we can continue to do that in our own personal capacity, and for some of you in an organizational capacity. So thank you. May Allah bless you all for taking the time and for honoring my father, and once again for remembering all the marhumin, for everyone who's on this call. So if we can recite one more Surah Fatiha, and I'll ask Brother Abdul Aziz Deoji, who is the president of the Organization for Islamic Learning, to please do a concluding dua for us. Al-Fatiha.
ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب ربي ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. Fatim, can you say this?
Yes.
Read it out, please.
In the darkness of mere being, kindle the light of meaning.
That is what your dad was all about. And for the years that I got to know him, this is something that's been here. It's always a reminder for me. But like Ali Reza Rajani was talking about, and the one thing about your dad is that, his turbines, the internal turbines, that he could walk beyond borders. He was totally human. When I look at it in, righteousness, he was in a state of awareness. He was always there, no matter what. And I remember some of the people, after, who stood up from all different walks of life, and what their tribute was, that in the middle of the night, it did not matter. For somebody like that, he is definitely going to remain alive for all of those that had an encounter with him. So bless you, bless your mom and your sisters. All right. So well done. Good program. And I just, with all the conditions that we are all going through, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. This is something that there is a light in each and every one of us, and let that be that we can kindle the light of meaning in our belief system. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Ma'as-salam.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, we conclude our program for today. Thank you everyone for joining. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.